Aloha all, and welcome to um, tax classes for 2022, tax year 2022. This will be based off of the Pub 17. We're starting on Chapter 1, Filing Information. So the first thing in Chapter 1 is, do you have to file? Most people that work will have to file a return. If you make less than $13,000, you may not need to file, but you may still want to file to get back any withholding. Okay. You can also take a look at Table 1-1 to see the different income levels at which different people need to file. Now, these numbers that you're looking at for your gross income, this is mostly for wage earners. If you have a business, this is a totally different story, and we'll get to that later. Okay? If you are retired, it can be a little bit more complicated to determine if you are over the filing threshold. If you're not getting SSA, you would still use these numbers on Table 1-1, and if you're over the age of 65, you do get a little bit of a bonus. If you are receiving Social Security, to determine whether or not you have a filing requirement, you would include half of your Social Security benefits along with any other tax-exempt interest that's more than $25,000. And then calculating the taxable Social Security will be discussed a little bit later. Okay, if you're married, it's almost always a tax benefit to file jointly, but there's sometimes other reasons that you may want to file jointly outside of tax purposes. Okay, again, looking at Table 1-1, it's almost $26,000. That's a filing requirement for a married couple. Now, even if you don't earn $26,000, you may still want to file to get credits like the child tax credit, additional child tax credit, and the earned income tax credit. Okay, if you're a child or a dependent, you may not have to file a tax return if you make less than $13,000, but as I noted earlier, you may want to file to get your withholding back. Now, the standard deduction for a dependent is up to $400 more than your earned income, as long as you stay below the levels on Table 1-1 for a single person. Okay. Now, if you do fall outside of those situations, you can look to Table 1-3 to other situations when you may still have to file. So, once you've determined if you have to file, when should you file? You should file before April 15th of the end of the tax year. Now, particularly for tax year 2022, you got a few extra days, and it ended on April 18th due to some holidays. But in most years, April 15th is the deadline without extensions. Now, how do you file? There are many different ways to file, and you can take a look at Table 1-4 to see some ways to free file. But as always, you can check out a tax professional like our sponsor, Hank's Tax Service. Give us a call at 808-853-1170. The number again, 808-853-1170 for fast and easy returns. You can also go to irs.gov. You can take advantage of some VITA or any tax pro in your area. Just make sure that they have a PTIN. That is how you can tell that they are a reputable preparer and not somebody just doing it on TurboTax. Okay? If you cannot file your taxes by April 15th, you should file an extension. This is an extension of time to file that gives you an additional 6 months by filing the Form 4868. Okay? You should file an extension even if you think you're getting a refund. It can help because there are some limits that are dependent on if you have an extension. Okay? The extension for filing is only ever an extension to file. It is never an extension to pay, but it does reduce your penalties by about 10 times, from $5 per month if you don't file an extension, down to half of 1% per month with an extension filed. Okay. To pay the least in penalties, you want to pay at least 90% of what you owe, and preferably for the IRS, all of what you owe before that April 15th deadline. So, as a tax professional, it's common practice to ask a client how much do they think they will owe, and just say, if you don't want to pay any penalties, pay that amount on April 15th. Okay, then when you file your actual taxes, if you overpaid, you will get a refund. There are some extensions to file. So if you're outside the US for any reason, you can get an additional 2 months to file. Okay, if you are active duty in a combat zone, your time to file is 180 days after the last day in combat zone or a qualified hospitalization. That's a little bit, qualified hospitalization is a little bit more in depth. Please check the Pub 17 to see if the hospital stay for your combat zone qualifies. If you make a mistake on your return or left something off, you will have to file an amended return with a Form 1040X. You've got 3 years from when the return was filed, normally April 15th without an extension, or 2 years from the last time that you paid the IRS to get your money back. So when you file a return before the deadline, it is indicated as filed on the deadline, April 15th. If you file after, it will be the date that you actually filed. Okay? What are some penalties that can come along if either you don't file on time or you don't file properly? So we've touched on some of these earlier, but the filing late penalty is 5% each month up to 25%. That's why you do want that extension, so it gives you an extra 6 months until those penalties start to kick in. Now, even if you do file an extension, you will be paying late if you don't pay by April 15th. So that's half of 1% each month up to 5%. There are also penalties for fraud, accuracy penalties, a substantial understatement penalty, erroneous claim for refund, and frivolous tax submissions, all things that can be penalized. Now, what happens if you have had identity theft? If you had your identity stolen, or even one of the credit reporting bureaus believes that your identity was stolen and gets reported to the IRS, you may be issued an identity protection PIN, an IP PIN. If you do not have the 6-digit IP PIN that will be mailed out in January, you will not be able to e-file. If you have lost your PIN or it never comes in the mail, you can get it online at irs.gov/get-an-IP-PIN, or go to irs.gov and search IP PIN. Okay, that is the quickest way to get it. You can also call the IRS and ask them to send you a paper copy, which will come generally in 14 days, 7 to 14 days. So that is who has to file and when they should file.